Hello, we thank you for tuning in for this session of the Media Literacy Discussion Club. Please don't be a stranger. Let us know what you think about this program by liking it or leaving a comment. To join our other AMC online programs, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, check updates on our website, amc.ru, and follow us on social media to learn, connect, and produce together. So this week's presentation is entitled, So Your Relatives Have Some Wild Ideas. How do you talk to them? As you could probably guess, it's about, chatting with your friends or family about misinformation. It is a presentation I put together by research, but mostly it has been inspired by conversations I've had with friends or family and trying to kind of hone in on what are some good techniques for handling this situation. I've kind of had a theme in the last couple months. If there was one keyword, I'd say of my presentations, it would be trust. So using your trust for good wherever you have it, right? If you have trust with friends or family and you can, let somebody know that they, might be sharing some misinformation and get them to be better media consumers and a purveyor and a sharer of better information, then, that's something I think you should consider at least taking advantage of. So first off, we're going to go over a familiar scenario to change a slide. This is one that I think is familiar to a lot of different people. But this particular example is adapted from an article by the journalist Anand Ram. There's just to let everybody know that there are a ton of resources that I consulted for this presentation, and at the very end we'll pause on the slides with the website links so you can go check them out for yourself to see what the full article said that I'm taking information from. So this is a familiar scenario outlined by the journalist Anand Ram. He says, let's say your well-meaning dad drops a link to a site you've never seen before. The headline screams, 5G towers cause coronavirus, with his own caps-locked commentary reading, scary stuff. Do you ignore it? Do you call him out, saying how ridiculous it is? As much as you want to reply to your dad, this is stupid, and here's a fact-checking article that shows why you're stupid, warns Claire Wardle, director of First Draft, a nonprofit focused on helping people tackle misinformation. If you do that, you publicly shamed him, which means that he's less likely to listen to you the next time. Claire Wardle is somebody we're going to hear from a little bit later in the presentation as well. So Wardle points to research suggesting that chewing someone out like that, publicly shaming someone on social media can lead to a bad outcome, or at least an unproductive outcome, right? What happens is that your dad doubles down on his view and he dismisses what you're saying, right? And that's, in my mind, just as bad, if not worse, than doing nothing at all. Because it's a wasted opportunity. And, at least if you'd ignored your father in this instance, you still had that kind of bridge of trust open, but maybe, he's closed the drawbridge. It's like being stuck in St. Petersburg at 3 o'clock in the morning and the bridges are up, you can't get across. Think about this presentation will encourage you to think about not just how to go about, talking with relatives, friends, family, about misinformation, but some approaches, some actual, finesse. Is there a finesse to it as well? So to change the slide, it's a great enough challenge to become media literate yourself, right? It can take a lot of time to become aware of your own biases, to get to know different publications, take the time to fact check articles, and be disciplined with what information you share with others. To change the slide, it's one thing to see misinformation being shared by strangers, but what do you do when it's your family or friends, right? changing the slide. I think for many, our first instinct is to make a correction. You see something you feel like is wrong, you want to let the person know you're wrong. But anyone who has tried to correct false or misleading information online probably has discovered that things don't always work out the way that we would hope or expect. You know, and I've tried a lot of different approaches with family, acquaintances, strangers. And for me personally, I've had 4 different kinds of responses, right? The first one, and the least fortunate of them, and one I try to avoid, is has led to acrimony, right? Or severe disagreement, harsh words, a tone that's quite negative, forces you just to disengage and walk away. You know, maybe when I was much younger, I would probably have engaged it a bit and then finally walked away. Now I really, if I see it getting out of hand, I do stop. So, which is why it's important not to waste trust when you do have it, I think. So that's one way, you know, and that's usually about contentious issues, societal issues, etc. And there used to be a lot of it, you know, and I think I was talking to some friends in recent months about this, and I think we used to have more of it than we do today. I mean, there's some people who love it, I think, who really feed on these kinds of like interactions. There's quite a few people that do, to be honest, amongst the people I interact with on social media. Not necessarily that I interact with them, but I witness their engagements with other people. But I think with time, a lot of the people who would challenge us and that we would challenge have drifted away. I remember about 10, 12 years ago, there were quite a few people. There were 3 or 4 people who reliably, I would post something and I would get like a very negative response from them. And these are people I like went to school with decades ago, who I didn't have really that much interaction with anymore, except for the fact that we were Facebook friends or something along those lines. But with time, you know, they got tired of me and maybe I got tired of them and they drifted away. So actually most of the information that I see is you know, most of the friends I have, they tend to be honest, points of view that, you know, I am comfortable with, that I find agreement with, and this is just like a natural selection of social media universes, I guess, so to speak. And I think it's totally fine, right? You know, this is also, you know, we also don't like interacting with people in real life, you know, if they completely disagree with us on every single issue. And social media is is not the whole social. I acknowledge that social media is a curated form of reality and a curated selection of expression. And with time, I have noticed that a lot of the more challenging kind of opinions, and by challenging, I also include, you know, stuff that I definitely don't agree with, and stuff that borders on misinformation, has become less and less. Okay, back to the presentation and end rant there. Another response I've had led to a deletion of the article posted, which I don't know what to make of sometimes, right? You know, I say, hey, so-and-so, you know, just to let you know, this information is deemed to be inaccurate. And the next time I check, you know, a day or 2 later, I see that it's gone. No explanation. I'm of 2 minds on this. You know, if it was an outright piece of misinformation and an honest mistake, I guess that's okay. But, you know, it's also an opportunity to, you know, discuss, you know, kind of like what led to that, and, you know, perhaps that opportunity is gone already if the slide or the post has been deleted already. Sorry, I skipped the second one. Has led to polite acknowledgement but no sign of correction. This has happened quite a few times where I'll see something and I see something that's inaccurate in it, and I'll let the person know politely, and they'll politely nod back at me and let me know that they've heard what I've had to say, but they're not going to change their mind. right? This happened several times last summer. There was an article that it wasn't the greatest article, but it wasn't a terrible article either, but it was completely out of date, right? So it was something about weather patterns. Make a long story short, it was relevant in May. It was not so relevant in July, but the people who needed that information needed it in July, and they insisted on keeping it. Never mind that it was inaccurate because the time was completely off, and I let them know that it was inaccurate, and they said, "Thank you for letting me know, but my major point here stands, and so I'm not going to delete it." What can you do in that kind of situation? You can walk away. That's about it. You tried. You fought the good fight, right? And the best of all possible worlds, is when these kinds of moments, these kinds of interactions lead to a dialogue, including a request for more information. Since I've become, a media literacy specialist, I have gotten more and more of these kinds of interactions, which is nice. Changing the slide. So some questions that you can ask yourself. Anytime you see something you're not 100% sure about, you think it might be misinformation, some questions you can ask yourself before you get involved, right? Should you engage them or leave them alone, right? Is this a situation where you can have an impact, right? Do you have sufficient trust with this person in order to be able to engage them in some way, right? The odds of you actually, seeing misinformation and saying you're wrong and then being like, you're right, I've completely changed, now I'm a media literate person, are extremely slim, right? Most engagements, just like most studies of media literacy, right, it doesn't happen overnight. It's probably better described as a lifelong learning process. So if you see a piece of misinformation, at some level, it'd be good if you could follow up with them again. People generally respond better to positive feedback long term. So if you see somebody says, sharing something that you consider to be misinformation, have a short chat about it, whether it's on the actual page or in a private message or by phone or in person, in the rare circumstances that's possible these days. If you do see them sharing something that you find to be great information, it's good if you could also let them know. But these kinds of situations are only possible if you have the possibility to engage that person, right? A total stranger, you might get a kick out of it on Twitter if that's something you have fun with, which a lot of people have fun with, to be honest. But even if you point out that somebody is sharing something that that might be misinformation, you're probably not going to have a great impact if that's the only time you talk to them, right? Probably it will take kind of more repeated engagement, more long-term engagement if you really want to have a long-term impact. I guess that makes sense, right? Another question you can ask yourself, and this is not me playing devil's advocate, but just really asking. We're all entitled to our opinions, aren't we? And by that I mean, is it just you disagree with what they say as an opinion, or is it really misinformation that should not spread, or is it something a much more gray area? Is this an opinion, or is this somebody trying maybe through subconsciously, are they sharing misinformation or are they sharing their opinion? It's a question worth asking yourself for sure before you engage somebody, because if you're not sure of your intentions and their intentions before you begin, you might not have the greatest results. And then third, what is our responsibility? Anyway, like a lot of stuff in media literacy, there are no easy answers. These are open-ended questions. These are questions you can ask yourself for a very long time. These are questions that you think you can know the answer to one day and not know it so well the next. So, and that's basically what I say in the next slide. So going even further off of that, as I've already suggested, I think first off, ask yourself, what level of trust do I have with this person? because I would argue, changing the slide to the one with the photo, trust is key, right? Trust is going to determine whether or not you have an impact, right? If this person is definitely not going to listen to you because they don't know you, or you've, haven't had a great interaction on social media before, you're probably not going to make a lot of headway with this person. So trust is very key to being able to engage someone and have an impact on their media consumption and sharing behavior. Changing the slide. Studies have shown that you're most likely to be effective in combating misinformation with someone who trusts you versus a stranger. And this is something that has played out, quite a bit as I've seen and analyzed media and social media over the years. Changing the slide again. So Emma Frances Bloomfield, a professor of communication studies at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, suggests keeping the following 3 things in mind before you engage somebody, online regarding misinformation. First off, is it worth engaging, right? Is there enough time to engage them in a conversation? Are you just going to make a comment and then say, all right, now I'm going to take a break from social media for 2 days? Because if you're not willing to really, be a part of it and be present for that person and their responses, then maybe it's not worth engaging, I think is what Professor Bloomfield here is suggesting. Do they seem interested in and open to discussion? And do you have a personal connection with them where they value your opinion? Right? These are all really important things, to ask yourself before you get started. Because, I can say for sure that when you do decide to engage somebody about potential misinformation online, or not the greatest media media hygiene in terms of sharing stuff, it could be pretty taxing and could take a lot out of you. So if you're not up for the challenge, then maybe ask yourself, is it worth engaging? The second point that Professor Bloomfield makes is that she says, don't patronize. Instead of treating the conversation as a corrective lecture, treat the other person as an equal partner in the discussion. This is a really hard thing. Tone is the hardest thing about social media. Most of us haven't figured it out, right? It's really easy to sound snarky or funny, in a tweet that you just send and then you just ignore all the responses. But it's really hard to have an appropriate tone amongst what can be quite a diverse group of people commenting on a post. And when you go in, treating, your follow-up post, or you're pointing out somebody, trying to engage them on a post that they've made as a lecture, this is wrong, this is irresponsible. Don't be surprised, if you haven't treated the other person as an equal partner in the discussion, that they're going to either get angry or disengage completely. Offer to trade information, right? And what that means is not just like that is not a one-way trade. Like, oh, here I pointed out that this is wrong. Let me tell you the really good stuff. You could say instead, what is here is that you say, hey, why don't we do this? I'll give you a couple of sources on this topic that I found interesting, and why don't you give me a couple of the ones that you found pretty good too, and let's check in a few days and see what we think. Maybe there's some good to be learned from both sides, right? It's a very difficult time, speaking about the U.S. in particular, where people like to be really entrenched in the I am right. And if I am, the other person can have a different opinion than me. So it's really a bold step, I think, to take a step back and say, you know what, I'll take a look at your information if you take a look at mine. And I'll consider it, and I will consider you, an equal person in this discussion who might have something to share with me. It can be challenging. It can be challenging, especially if you think that you have the answers, but this is where having an open mind, can really be a great asset to you. Continuing on to the next slide, before you begin, I recommend asking yourself what role are your own biases playing in the information that you want to address. Is confirmation bias at play here? Or in other words, are your own personal beliefs getting in the way of having an effective conversation? Or could they get in the way of having an effective conversation? Is your mind sufficiently open so that you're not just one way telling the person what you think and they're not ready to receive information from the person you're trying to engage? Changing the slide. The Australian science journalist Tegan Taylor says that it's worth checking your own facts before you engage somebody on social media about an issue or potential misinformation. Sometimes misinformation can be obvious, right? Sometimes it's so, obvious, like, the date is, June 15th, 2025. It's pretty obvious to point out that is wrong information, in an article, for example, if you saw that today. But sometimes, at other times, misinformation, it's quite possible that you're the one who's being fooled. This has happened, and I've seen it so many times, where somebody comes out and says, you're wrong, blah, 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 and it turns out they're the one who is wrong. So regardless of the situation, Taylor suggests that a quick revision of the evidence is worthwhile, whether or not you then decide to bring up the story with the family member or the friend who has shared it, right? So regardless, before you do a revision, unless it's like something you're really extraordinarily knowledgeable about, right? Do a quick revision of the evidence and the facts. See what's there to make sure that you're not the one, who's casting shade on somebody that might not be deserved, or maybe the issue is more nuanced than you might believe it to be at that moment. And changing the slide, never underestimate the possibility that this might be a contentious issue with no clear answer, right? It's true, as much as we don't, many people, we could say during the coronavirus, as well as when facing a variety of other issues, it's much easier if you're certain that you have the right information, or you're certain that this is the correct way to go about it. It is really challenging to hold contradictory thoughts in one mind at the same time. It's really hard to be, I think it's a really hard thing to be a nuanced thinker in the 21st century with, social media and the era of post-truth and so on and so forth. But I think it's necessary. I think it's really important, and I stand up for it. So once again, never underestimate the possibility that this might be a contentious issue with no clear answer, multiple answers, right? It's even possible that you are relying on incorrect or incomplete information. Please always keep an open mind. And if you find that it's an issue that you're too passionate about, for example, maybe this is not for you to step in, maybe this is somebody else who sees it at a slightly different angle. Maybe they're the ones who are, more suited towards, debunking that kind of misinformation. You got to, I always told my students this when I taught at American universities. You've got to choose your battles, right? You can't put all of your energy into every single paper. You should, wait for the ones that really deserve your attention and have your interest, and go there. So in the same way, choose your battles. I mean, find the places where you've got the trust, built up, where you can effectively engage, make an impact with somebody, and choose one, where you're able to keep enough of an open mind to, kind of cement that engagement and make it a worthwhile one. Changing the slide. So the journalist Brooke Burrell, citing a study by media scholars at George Mason and Georgetown universities, found that correcting falsehoods on social media can be effective when it's personal. Information from friends might have greater impact because we trust those closest to us. So she suggests that she has a few things that she suggests in particular from this article that I read Engage with the person, not with the content. And what she means by that is something that Daniel Young, a communications scholar at the University of Delaware, also expounds upon. Right? They say that what you need to do is engage with the human first. Right? Make it your mission not to shame someone, but to kind of engage with the person and look at it as a long-term goal of maybe learning something from this person, as well as helping them become a better media consumer. Right? Continuing, Young says empathy, perspective taking, doing outreach that connects with the person and not the topic. Right? Just as oftentimes, when you have an interesting or a fun conversation, if it's a really, if you respect the person and you trust the person, it's going to be a much more meaningful discussion or conversation than if you don't, right? So just always remember to be empathetic and keep an open mind. And try to connect with the person and not the topic. Because when you're only focused on the topic, I think the humanity of the person before you, or in the social media screen that you're looking at, can lose perspective. And I see that happening a lot. People just get so overwhelmed with somebody's opinion that they don't even remember who it is they're chatting with. It's like they've lost interest in the person. They're only interested in the statement that may have been made, which online could be taken completely out of context, could be misunderstood. And I've seen misunderstood statements that I could tell that the person didn't do the best job, wasn't the most artful in expressing themselves, but I could understand where they were coming from. But by the time they had the opportunity to explain themselves, they were under a pile of, nasty comments, and it was very difficult, if impossible, to dig themselves out of that pile-on that can happen on social media. So, changing the slide, Burrell suggests meeting the other person halfway. Try to figure out why they're sharing a piece of fake news. Right? If you look at it as your job to be a police person who's up there to clean up other people's social media feeds, ask yourself, who hired you for this position, right? Instead, look at it as, try to engage where you feel like you can. I feel like I'm repeating myself over and over again. Try to engage where you feel you could actually have an impact, where you find yourself in a situation where you are willing and able and have an open mind enough to meet the other person halfway, and try to figure out where they're coming from. You'll often find some very interesting things, right? For example, to change the slide, if a friend shares misinformation about the safety of vaccines, they're likely doing so because they are worried about the health of their children, right? And when somebody's willing to open up to you about a topic that is either taboo or controversial, doesn't mean that they feel like they're 100% certain of that and they're attacking you and think you're wrong. There could be some level of vulnerability there. So listen very carefully to what they're saying. It could be about much more. It could be something completely else. This could be, a symptom, but not the actual, the disease, so to speak, for terms of a kind of uneven analogy, right? You see the post on misinformation, but it's really talking about something else. It's really, if you listen to the person, you'll find out that they're much more worried about something else. And maybe you can assist them. Maybe you can talk to them. Maybe you can help them out just by listening to them, where they're coming from. And if somebody shares something that's sensitive or controversial, this also could be an opportunity. It could be a sign that they trust you. So I would at least try to figure out, if you're up for it, if this is an opportunity to engage with somebody. And I do feel like there's quite a bit of engagement on social media. But these kinds of engagements where people with very different views on certain subjects come together is not as common as we'd like to be. So if there's like one big takeaway here from this entire presentation is, if you see an opportunity to engage somebody with different beliefs than you do, and they're demonstrating to you that they're vulnerable, or that they trust you, or they're curious about what you have to say, it's like throwing a contact, a business card in the trash can before you follow up with that person. Right? You have an opportunity that's being wasted. I think. All right, continuing along to the next slide. The journalist Anand Ram, who we met at the beginning of the presentation, works for the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Company, states that understanding emotion and sentiment are the key when you're talking about engaging somebody on misinformation. Compassion can help, when the facts shift, especially during this pandemic where official advice and research has evolved so quickly, right? Basically, I think he means here is that, be forgiving. People make mistakes. I think I don't know anybody who's been particularly active on social media or sharing information in the last couple of months who's been 100% perfect and 100% has made accurate predictions and only shared the best information. Be compassionate. Be compassionate. Understand where people are coming from. In fact, shift when they change. Don't rub it in the other person's face. See, I told you you're wrong. Just say, yeah, I wasn't sure about that one. Looks like it's not as accurate as we thought. And we'll get to using different kinds of pronouns such as we to show that it's a common problem that people have a little bit later in the presentation. But show compassion for other people, right? Especially at a time where things are changing so quickly. Follow up with them and try to say, yeah, that's what they were talking about yesterday, but today they're talking about this. What do you think about that? Try to keep people engaged. I think that deep down, that is the point of social media, even if it doesn't always live up to its highest ideals. But in addition to showing compassion, Ram also says that it's also good to remind people and keep them aware of how dangerous misleading information can be. And he has two more points that I thought were really good in this article that I read, which once again will be in the resources section at the end of the presentation. Understand shared responsibility, right? Maintaining close relationships is key, right? You can't, you could tell your parents, you're wrong, that's it, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Well, what good is that going to do, right? So if you have an opportunity, even if it's challenging, keep that door open, and try to frame it in a way that this is like, a shared thing. I'll share my opinions with you if you share your opinions with me. Let's make it a dialogue, a conversation, a discussion, and not just once a week I tell you what I think, you keep your mouth shut because you don't want to engage, and then vice versa. You tell me what you think, and I also do the same. Right? So understand that it is a shared thing, interacting and sharing information. The spreading of mis or disinformation is technical, but also human, right? Which suggests several things, right? That artificial intelligence is not going to completely save the day. As I mentioned in a presentation last week, I believe it was, even all these different organizations that are engaging different artificial intelligence programs to kind of point out misinformation, whether it's on Facebook or other social media platforms, there's still a human component to that to kind of oversee what's going on there. And understand that, humans make mistakes, and journalists are humans as well. And so, just this kind of goes back to the compassion point that was made a little bit earlier. All right, changing the slide again. Back to Claire Wardle, who I'll remind you is the executive director of First Draft, a non-profit focused on investigating misinformation. I just learned of this organization actually today. It's surprising. I think I may have come across them some months ago, but just really in passing. But today was the first time I looked at their website. And if you're interested, that there's some good information there. They definitely do a lot of fact-checking kinds of activities, and they have a special course. I didn't check it out, but you're more than welcome to. That was on coronavirus, for reporting coronavirus stuff for journalists. So it could be worth a look. She says that this is about members of society working with one another. Education programs can't bear the full weight of teaching people how to detect false information. We have to get through it together and share responsibility. Similarly, right, media literacy is not something that I could have a 1-hour class on and you walk away and you're like, I'm media literate. Just like learning how to read is not something you could do in one session either, right? These things take time. You have to learn how to, what there is to look out for, learn a little bit of history, how these things kind of work, how misinformation works, what kind of technology can be useful to you, and helping you figure out what's authentic and what's not so much. So how societies react to it, there's all sorts of factors that go into it. But the most important point is, yes, we have to get through it together and share responsibility. And this implies having good relationships with one another as human beings. So to continue on, Wardle also says, she's mentioning here, about different generations talking past one another when it comes to misinformation. She says that rather than younger generations lecturing grandparents, it's worth respecting each other's experience. And you can take this away and apply it to everything, right? Understand that the stranger, maybe even you're interacting with on social media, has different experiences from you, has different information than you've seen. It's coming from a different place, doesn't know much about it, maybe spoke too soon. Have a little compassion, right? But starting from a place where you respect each other's experience is always a good place. Sometimes I understand these things can, you can encounter somebody who is quite ignorant and is not interested in learning anything, and is not interested in engaging something, and that's fully your right at that point to disengage. But she says that we tend to frame sharing of misinformation amongst older family members as, "Hey, Uncle Bob, you're wrong." This shuts down conversation, right? There's real value in teaching one another. Wardle instead suggests using we and us, and emphasizing how everyone is subject to disinformation or misinformation. All of us. It's true. I and everybody I know and everybody I've ever known has fallen for something that is incorrect, inaccurate, or even fake, right? She says, for example, lots of people are trying, this is one way you could describe it. Lots of people are trying to manipulate us. I got fooled by this last weekend when I really wanted to believe a story was true. Why do you think people are trying to manipulate us in this way? Or say, we're all going through this together. There's a lot of challenges. Try to have a more communal kind of approach to this, and rather than I am right or I have the right facts or the best facts and you don't kind of attitude. Continuing on, she says that fake news isn't simply an online issue. After all, we're all living in siloed information environments. We're increasingly in a world where people only see one side of an issue, right? It's a very unfortunate fact, right? We live in these information bubbles, as I was describing before, where, I look on my Facebook page and it's all one variety of outrage. There's not a lot of nuanced kind of opinions, right? Over time, people have dropped out, if we don't exactly agree with one another on a bunch of issues. We're either left with people who share no personal opinions at all, or it's very much similar to the kinds of things that we may believe. we're living in a world where people only see one side of an issue. I don't think I'm exposed to, in my social media, a wide variety of opinions that exist around the world. Changing the slide. You should always remember that in trying to change someone's belief, trying to change someone's beliefs, you're up against something called confirmation bias, right? So even if you want to change, tell somebody they're wrong, I'm right, this is why you need to believe me, you come up against something called confirmation bias, which will trip up many attempts to change someone's opinion very quickly. To explain, we have Jennifer Beckett, a social media and communications expert at the University of Melbourne, who says that confirmation bias is where we deliberately filter out things we don't agree with, and continued exposure to incorrect information leads to a situation where we believe something just because we've been told it's true a lot, she explained. You really need to listen to someone to find out where they're coming from if you want to have any chance of changing their minds. This is an excellent point that Beckett brings up here, is that, I've had many conversations with family and friends in recent years where somebody just, in their information silo, in their information bubble, on their social media pages, at least everybody who decides to raise their voice about something seems to believe something. And there's no pushback at all. And so they start to believe something's true just because they've been told it so many times, right? The extreme end of the example would be, if you hear that the world is flat enough times, you're eventually going to start to believe that the world is flat, or you're at least going to, probably start to express some level of skepticism. I've had people in media literacy seminars say, really question some stuff that I was a bit surprised about, just because, I think that they are interacting in places where there's a lot of skepticism. Maybe there's some conspiracy theories. I've had people ask me, but you don't believe that people went to the moon, right? That's all just kind of made up, isn't it? And be quite genuine about it. And I'll tell you what I told that person. My level of skepticism for something that seems pretty well established, such as that, is pretty high. So you have to really, provide some convincing stuff before I'm even going to start to listen in that regard. But I think if you were to engage this person at a deeper level, you might find that something else is troubling them. And that this is just really a symptom of something much larger at play, that maybe even like this idea that they've expressed to you isn't really the thing that's troubling them. It's something else altogether. So once again, you really need to listen to someone to find out where they're coming from if you want to have any chance of engaging them and changing their minds. So earlier, the study by Borrell suggested that people, changing the slide, who are willing to believe in conspiracy theories often are not affected by corrective information. They're not looking, for easy answers. They are looking for easy answers. They're not looking for nuance, right? So, just be aware. You have to, social media discussions can really be agitating, frustrating things, right? So if you see somebody who just, believes in something, every time you try to engage them on it, they're just like, no, you're wrong. This is all a big conspiracy. This might be a good time to say, all right, I got to go. Moving on to the next slide. Mike Anani, a media scholar at the University of Southern California, says, fact-checking a statement on social media goes to the core of someone's identity, right? You're not just asking them to accept the veracity of some piece of data or some statement, you're kind of asking them to change how they see themselves as a person. And that's a very different hurdle, right? So when you engage somebody, this goes back to where are you in terms of your trust with somebody? Are they going to be like, no, you don't tell me who I am, kind of thing? Ask yourself, do you have the level of trust to really make an impact and engage somebody on social media, right? If you're just like, listen, you're wrong here, here's the right information, you're at some level you're threatening somebody's core identity. You're saying, I'm right and you're stupid. I mean, that's how it's often, communicated in a lot of ways. So ask yourself, just be conscious of your approach. If you're just going to be so quick to say, those are the wrong facts, these are the right facts, would you please stop this misinformation, kind of dismissive tone, don't be surprised if you don't make too much progress with this person. Changing the slide. Sometimes another answer or response might be the most effective. Can you guess what it may be? That's right. Changing the slide again. If all else fails, just listen. People aren't always looking for answers. We assume we know why people are on social media and why they're sharing things. Sometimes it's pretty obvious and clear. A lot of times it's not. People aren't always looking for answers. Sometimes their social media posts are asking for something else altogether, as I suggested before in this presentation. Approach each instance with patience and keep an open mind. Changing the slide, right? It's very easy, very easy. I've seen it happen so many times for an online conversation to go completely off the rails with one misunderstood tone or statement very quickly. A good attempt, an honest attempt can go wrong very, very quickly. Dr. Jerry Crescente, a relationship expert at Deakin University, says that we're still trying to form our norms and the way to do this. We've been doing face-to-face relationships for thousands of years. We're still trying to work out what we're doing online. I think that it's a little bit easier when it's video conferencing, which was a thing certainly before 2020, but not at the level that we've all been engaging in. It's a little easier when you can actually see the person. Most of the stuff we're talking about, and I think what Dr. Crescente is talking about, are kind of more anonymous or much more detached kind of forms of interactions, such as you would find in commenting on social media posts or articles. Dr. Crescente, to change the slide, recommends thinking of how you would approach the situation if you were in the same room as the other person, right? I think we forget very quickly. We're just typing out like a bunch of messages really quickly, a lot of comments really quickly, and we feel good. And I've heard people tell me they get a rush when they get a comment in. I don't know if that's the most healthy way to look at it, but this is a great kind of point that Dr. Crescente makes. Would you do the same thing if you were in the same room as this person? I've also, and a lot of times it's no. I'm remembering one thing in particular from about 2-3 years ago. I was organizing an event. We needed a couple of people to participate in the event. Somebody didn't get there in time, and when we let them know, sorry, we'd love to have you maybe next time, but we already had a few volunteers. They just somebody I'd known several years just unloaded with expletives and nasty behavior. It was really quite nasty, and it was a group chat, 4 or 5 of us on it, and it was shocking. Honestly, this person I'd known for several years just unloaded, and next time I saw him, as if nothing happened. It was amazing. It was amazing. So I would recommend to that person, next time you decide to engage about something, try to approach the situation as if you were in the same room as the other people you're communicating with. Changing the slide. In some ways, it's easier to connect these days, right? Due to social distancing, we've become more accustomed and more comfortable with video conferencing. For example, Instagram recently introduced a new feature called co-watching, which will let you browse posts with your friends over in-app video chat. That's one approach. Which rather than just commenting, watch something or take a look at something together, or take a look at something that confuses you with somebody else together. That might be one more productive way to do it. We're almost done with the presentation. Just a couple more slides. Why not video chat your way through some of these contentious issues? You might learn as much as your friend or relative, as well as might cement your relationship further in the process, right? Bring people together. It's a good thing. I know it is. Changing the slide, Leah Chernikov, journalist, offers 2 other great points. When engaging in a conversation about perceived misinformation, don't come in with the attitude that, don't try to win, right? Don't come in with like, all right, I'm going to tell this person what's right and I'm going to win this argument and I'm going to have a good day. I've definitely seen people who take that approach. And I don't know that it's the most productive. As another good point that Chernikov makes is keep having the conversation. It's almost never one and done. After all, media literacy is not a precise science, right? So let's say you're able to make some inroads with somebody, not perfect, about some kind of misinformation or come to some kind of understanding or share information. Try to keep things going. You're going to have more of an impact and you're going to see two-way benefits the longer you're able to keep that dialogue going. Right. So here we've approached, remember that first slide that we looked at the very, very beginning of the presentation, about the well-meaning dad who drops the link to the site you've never seen before, about the 5G tower causes, coronavirus. You ignore it, you call them out, say how ridiculous it is, you tell me stupid. One way to resolve such a conundrum, such a thing such as this, is to change the slide. You could use this as an example. Hey, Dad, I saw what you posted. It's interesting because I've actually seen a number of people post that, but I think the reason people are sharing it right now is because they're scared and they're looking for answers. I'd love to talk because I'm really worried too, Dad. So share, demonstrating compassion, showing the other person that you're all in this together. That's a good thing. It's a productive way to go about sharing information, talking about information, and stopping misinformation from being, a really negative thing that it is on the world today. All right, I'm going to show you the presentations, and Robert, if we could pause on them for a minute so that people can, do a screenshot or whatever. That'd be great. And I'm ready to start taking some of your questions and comments. So I see one question from, this was several minutes ago, from, I don't know, it's an unusual name, but Geg CF12. Is fake news connected to rumors? Rumors usually come true. What about fake news or some ads? Sure, there's this whole kind of landscape, of stuff out there. If fake, completely fake is a 10 and completely true is a 1, most stuff is somewhere in between. Hopefully it's in, closer to the 1. And keep in mind, right, journalism is the first, I say this a lot, the first draft of history, right? What that means is that, journalists do get things wrong because they're trying to explain things and gather facts and information for their readers and their media consumers as quickly as they can, while still, obtaining, staying true to media ethics and responsibilities and fact checking and so on and so forth. But they get stuff wrong. Or they might be offering incomplete pictures, right? Rumors, there's also this practice in journalism where, somebody speaks off the record and on the record. On the record means you can quote me 100%. Off the record means I'm going to tell you this. You do what you want with this information, but you cannot attribute it to me. That sometimes people can use that to spread rumors. Certainly the internet's full of rumors. Is it connected to fake news? Sure. But it's not a clear relationship. Things can start out as rumors and be proven true later on. Things can start out as rumors and, be declared completely false and fake later on. So that's how I answer that question. A question from Misha Holy J. Is there any source of social media you trust? I would say that social media on the whole has positives and negatives. I'll have a very nuanced response to this question, right? As I've explained before, like there's, you got to take the whole, picture into account when you talk about social media, right? It allows us to, during the coronavirus, for example, see what's going on around the world and understand that, we're all in this together in a lot of ways. We were able to get a peek into China, for example, via social media really early on. And that, I think, helped a lot of people really take it seriously and see what was going on and so on and so forth, as well as, share light moments to help us get through the several moments that were really, really challenging. Several months of, not being able to live in an apartment and so on. And it's challenging, seeing Italians on their porches or on their balconies, playing the accordions and singing along helped. It helps, social media helps people from small towns, be in touch with the wider world. It helps you be able to work remotely or find out information from different places. It can help you connect with people in ways that were unimaginable a generation ago. But it's also a place where, it's very difficult to police, as I think the owners of particularly Twitter and Facebook have found in recent years. It's very difficult to know what they should do, what role social media should play. It is a place where you should really always be a bit skeptical, because the point of social media is often to have an exclusive, to get something out there really quickly. There's a lot of people motivated on building their brand and getting likes. There's a lot of different motivations from a lot of different people, most of whom you don't know personally. So I'd say, use it, for all the positive things that I, keep in touch with a wide variety of people, follow all sorts of interesting people in your professional and personal lives, celebrities, whatever. It's all great. You can find all sorts of funny cat videos, but always keep your skepticism up, right? Just because you saw it on social media definitely does not mean that it's true. So, it can be a place where you learn about something, but it should not be the place where you stop learning about something. Sure. Any more questions? Another question from Misha Holy J. How do you prefer to receive information about what is happening in the world? From a wide variety of places. So for me, I definitely follow a lot of journalists on Twitter. You can find out a lot of great information. Journalists tend to know a lot of other journalists, so they share interesting stuff. Twitter's a great place to see how things unfold, to see different opinions, but it's a place where I start to learn about something. I also read tons of websites that I believe that I have built up some kind of relationship with over time. What I mean by that is, it's not like I'm not skeptical of them. It's not like, I believe 100% of what they're telling me, but, I've read enough of them to have an idea of who they are. I understand what their point of view is, what kind of blind spots they may have, what biases they may have. And I keep that in mind when I'm reading. And, sometimes, if I want to find out something about a big issue, I'm reading 4 or 5 sources if I really want to understand it well. different opinions, how different countries around the world maybe have a view on something. That can be a really interesting way to get a pretty interesting grasp on an issue. Is sometimes you're limited with English, but read an article from 4 or 5 countries writing in English about a certain issue. You'll start to see. There's definitely the journalists who work in different places and different papers and different countries. They bring their experiences and their culture with them, and that can lead to slightly different way of examining an issue, and so forth and so on. Happening in the world, I assume you mean like kind of current kind of stuff. I also do read quite a bit of nonfiction to learn more in depth about other issues. Thank you for the questions. Good. All right. So we thank you for tuning in for this session of the Media Literacy Discussion Club. I'm Joe Crescente once again. Please don't be a stranger. Let us know what you thought about this program by liking it or leaving a comment. To join our other AMC online programs, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check updates on our website, amc.ru, and follow us on social media to learn, connect, produce together. Have a good evening.